Randy Vance, and thanks for joining me today on my dock. Well, I'm not actually on my dock. As you can see, I'm at Bull Shoals Lake in Arkansas, and I'm with Rick Pierce, the president of BassCat Boats. In all my years of reporting on boats, shooting videos, testing them, I've driven thousands of boats, yet I've never been satisfied with my performance in bass boats. Getting that last little bit of performance out of the boat is all about controlling a lot of nuances in the behavior of the boat, and Rick Pierce is an expert in that, and he's going to try to show me how to do that today.
You ready to go, Randy? We'll get out there and we'll try to work on it a little bit. By the end of the day, we're going to have you smoking one.
All right. Now, we started out today in the classroom, and this was where we got a picture of the dynamics we'd be working against.
Randy, we're going to go over a couple of things that people do when they try to drive a bass boat. We're going to work with you today and try to figure out exactly what those forces are that you're fighting, why you don't understand them. And there's things people are pretty common. The first one starts with a prop. So on a common prop, what you've got is surfacing blades. So you've got all these things that interact, and this amount of surfacing blade creates torque. So as you get torque, you load the motor mounts. So you've got a couple of factors there, and those are motor mounts. So this is loading pressure on the motor mounts and controlling slippage also. So you've got a slip factor on bass boats of about between 8% to 12% on most bass boats. And on the engine, you've got a series of motor mounts that come down here to this prop. They load those forces side to side as this slips, and you're moving with this oscillation and this surfacing blade, and so as you load those forces, it accentuates. And the other thing people do is they overdrive one. So as you take a common bass boat, we'll just mock one up here, and you take, and this is your center line that runs through the middle of the bass boat, the freaking center line. What people want to do is they all try to change these forces, so as it moves to this point, they move to this point, and they go left and right. And left and right swing, what happens is you really want that force to be, try to hold it left of center. So what happens is you hold it about 2 inches to the left, and as that 2 inches to the left, you're kind of letting that boat, keeping it to the left and never letting those motor mounts load and unload. And so it keeps all those pressures going one direction. If you let it go right and left, and that's what everyone does, it's just going to continue to get worse because you're unloading and loading those motor mounts are just going to keep getting sloppy. So really, to commonly drive a bass boat, you want to always keep it to the left. And as long as you can keep that to the left, you can tend to control it in time. The other thing, there's about 3 or 4 factors, and of course, we talked about a lot of them. One's engine height. Everybody wants to overload engine height. Number 2 is probably trim. Number 3 winds up being basically a factor of this oscillation. And then we're going to talk about that feel on that hand. So we want that hand in that 10 o'clock position, and I want to be right there with that hand as it feels. And then you can feel that wheel move, and it gets that soft part of your tissue and your skin, and you have a lot of sensitivity right here. Not as much here, but you have a lot of sensitivity right here on the bottom of your knuckles. You can feel that pull, and you can feel that hose expanding. You'll feel the motor mounts moving. You'll feel everything. And so we're really going to work on that feel a little bit too, and this prop moving, and you learning to control it. Time's a big factor because everyone wants to develop this over a short period, and it needs to go ahead and develop over a longer period of time. So you do it in stages. It's bulk trim. It's not trim all at once. Just trim it in stages and let it develop. And everything has to come up slow. And it needs time to develop pressures on the water, get the slippage out of the propeller. So if we want to keep the heights down, because we want to get that boat to run a straight shot. So we want this boat with an outboard motor to run a straight shot. So we want to let it develop. It takes time. Everybody wants to jump on the trim and go and run hard.
Let me ask you a question. When you're talking about the torque, you got the blade coming out, that top blade.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just leaving your bottom blades, which are pushing. That's what's pushing the motor.
As those blades turn right, it tends to increase that pressure. So if you put this blade in the water, and most guys can do this, and bury it, and you've driven boats as we talked earlier, you've driven boats where you can lower that blade in the water, and then that oscillation will actually go the other way because the two forces are fighting each other on both sides of the rotational circle.
So you actually still need to have some of that prop surface.
For control, you need some. And if you ever let it go right, you just accentuate the forces and they just get more out of control. So you get a lot of guys that they fight the wheel, and it's really hard to fight the wheel because you want the wheel to be right solid in the middle and just keep it left. And so what they do is they oversteer it to the right, oversteer it to the left, and the force just continues to get worse.
Well, that's what happens to me is I get to that point and there's no steering out of it. What do you have to do at that point?
Well, the simplest thing is trim down, slow down, and step back up and go back to stage one. And stage one is where you start stepping the trim up. You know, we talked about some fast reaction times to do some things, but really for most people, they just need to trim down and trim it up in stages. Everyone gets on the trim button too fast. I don't care if you're driving a 1985 Ranger bass boat or a brand new Allison. Everyone wants to drive the trim too hard, too fast. People want fast jack plates. I personally want a slow jack plate. I want my jack plate to be where it gives it time to develop. So the speed of the jack plate and speed of the trim are two things that actually oppose what my view is that guys want fast and I want slow. So one boat may take a lot more distance to run and develop lower pressures and reduce this slip factor. And over a number of runs, that slip factor, the boat A may take this far to develop slippage or reduce slippage, and the next boat may take this far to reduce slippage. And that time that it takes those is all in the step buttons on the trim. So you want to let that develop. You don't want to just jump in and drive it to the max on the trim, drive it to the max on engine height, because everything hasn't developed its full slippage points. We want this engine to come up in steps. We don't want the engine to come up all at once. We want to bring it up in quarter-inch bumps. Everybody lays on it too fast, especially with a hydraulic plate. And the other one is trim, so as this trim comes out, we want this trim to come out slow, so we want to do it in the stages also. We don't want it to come all the way to the full tilt range. We want to bring it up in little stages, and what happens with that, Randy, is this trim comes up and develops. It gives this whole time for these two aspects to develop and reduce this pressure without ever moving, because it takes them a while to take effect on that.
Our on-water classroom was a brand new model 2021.5 Eyra BassCat, powered by a Mercury 250 horsepower Pro XS. It was propped with a 24-inch pitch Mercury Fury prop. Rick made 82 miles per hour on that boat that day. I'd be happy if I could finally, comfortably, pass 70.
And the more time you give them to take effect, then you make your next move. Don't make drastic moves. Make short bumps on the trim and short steps on the jack plate if you're using one. Well, you're not the only one, Randy, so it's pretty common. Everybody kind of gets in a hurry, they rush it. We need to let the thing take time. We're going to work on getting that left to center and keeping that left to center. Again, we want to pretend this thing's a pendulum moving left to right. We never want it to go right. We always 100% want to keep that focus to where it's moving left. And I think as we do that, we'll start working on how we do it.
Okay. So we're going to get out there. I'm going to have my hand on the gear shift. This is where I'm going to trim. Foot on the throttle. I'm going to get it up on plane and then start trimming up. When I start getting to that critical speed, it's just going to be a touch of time.
Yeah, we're actually going to start touching before then. So we're going to move a little sooner on the touch. Once you get it up in that 50-55 range, then we're going to start working it up slow. So that's what everybody does. They want to get it to 65-70 quick. We're going to work 65-70. That's what's going to help you to drive it a little faster.
Let's give it a try.
All right, let's go.
It was clear I had a lot to unlearn to be able to employ the tactics and principles Rick Pierce relayed to me. The main principle to employ? Patience. It seems counterintuitive to take your time when trying to go as fast as you can. As Rick Pierce kept saying, though, you have to let speed develop. It took many runs that afternoon, but finally, with patience, I managed to achieve 78 miles per hour on the Speedo. Rick's top speed, 82 miles per hour. But now I had better knowledge of the tactics needed to achieve maximum speed on a performance bass boat. I'm Randy Vance on Bull Shoals Lake, but thanks for joining me on my dock with Rick Pierce, president of BassCat Boats. Thanks, boss.
That worked.